Hello everyone, Dr. Mike here, TCOM 408. Thank you for joining me. In this video we will continue our discussion of the truth and focus in on the truth in journalism. Now first let's talk about ethical video and audio editing of newscast content. Okay, all editing should be ethical. One issue here is taking things out of context. You always want to provide the context so that the video or audio content makes sense. Now, the National Press Photographers Association, the voice of visual journalists, has a code of ethics for at least for images used in the news. The NPAA says, as journalists, we believe the guiding principle of our profession is accuracy. Therefore, it's wrong to alter the content of a photograph in any way that deceives the public. Accuracy. Don't alter the content of a photo. Never deceive the public. The MPAA says editing should maintain the integrity of the photographic images, content, and context. They say do not manipulate images or add or alter sound in any way that can mislead viewers or misrepresent the subjects. So in the world of journalism, it's very important to maintain the integrity of the images. Now, sometimes news organizations will get caught using Photoshop to manipulate images. Here's an example where Fox News was accused of altering photos of some of the reporters at the New York Times to make them look a little more sinister, I suppose. One of the major professional associations in journalism is the Radio TV Digital News Association, and it has guidelines for the ethical editing of audio and video news content. It says don't reconstitute the truth, don't add sounds that didn't exist unless it's clear to the audience that they've been added in the edit room, transparency. And this professional group advises journalists to be very judicious in the use of music and special sound effects. This is news, not entertainment. And to use photographic and editing special effects very sparingly and very carefully. Now, more on the ethics of digital images in the news and in the world of advertising in an upcoming video. I have a lot more to say about the manipulation of photos and the ethics around all of that. But let's continue with some of the issues in the news. Here's some stuff that ought to bother you that seems a bit unethical sometimes. One thing is this tendency towards sensationalism that's always been a part of journalism. If it bleeds, it leads. This is playing up stories, okay, about accidents and crime and sex and celebrity. Sensationalism refers to subject matter that is calculated to excite and to please vulgar taste. It's the journalistic use of subject matter that appeals to these lower instincts, our more vulgar taste. But another big problem in journalism sometimes is the tendency towards the trivial, the stories that really don't affect a lot of people and really aren't that important. Trivialization just means to make something trivial, unimportant. Now, here's a question for you. How might the juxtaposition of the trivial and the significant within the newscast impact viewer perceptions of reality? What happens when we place the trivial and the significant next to each other? When we have this sort of juxtaposition, what might happen? Could the significant become more trivial And could the trivial become more significant? And could this affect our value differences? Another big problem in journalism is a tendency towards celebrity journalism, as opposed to the important issues that affect us in our daily lives. Celebrity journalism, that focuses on the personal lives of people, primarily big names in the entertainment industry. We learn about these folks sometimes through the paparazzi, the photographers who follow celebrities incessantly to obtain potentially embarrassing photographs. The paparazzi raise all kinds of ethical issues about intrusion and privacy. Two other concerns in the news: obscenity and disturbing images. Now, in news, in television news, strong language is typically avoided or bleeped out. They usually bleep out any strong language. But this ethic changed a little bit under the Trump administration. For example, CNN often quoted President Trump's strong language directly without any censorship. Now, here's a warning. Some disturbing and graphic content is ahead. Here it is, a gruesome picture about the aftermath of a terrorist attack in the Middle East. The reason I show you this is not to disturb you, but because I want to make some important arguments for and against displaying gruesome images. Now, in the world of news, there's a lot of forms of content that raise ethical concerns in terms of taste and decency and acceptability that require some viewer discretion. Video footage or images that raise ethical concerns include things like dead body shots, images of gore and grief, pictures of the physically and mentally afflicted, vulgar words and gestures, sexually offensive pictures, pictures that embarrass or ridicule people. So at issue here in the world of news is usually good taste and or invasion of privacy concerns. So what if certain distasteful or shocking material is considered important to the narrative, to telling the whole story? Different organizations and different people have different standards and practices. Decisions about taste and decency usually revolve around what facts are necessary for the audience to know. We can make some interesting arguments for and against sanitizing the construction of reality in the news and in documentaries. Is obscuring or not reporting certain facts or details a form of self-censorship that compromises objectivity and fidelity to the truth, and which does not serve the public interest? In other words, is it necessary sometimes for people to actually see the consequences of war and other horrible things that happen in the world? Most of us believe we have an obligation to tell the truth, but also to honor the viewers. So there are some common methods for mitigating negative audience reactions to strong content, to tapping down strong content. You're familiar with all of these. One thing that people do sometimes is provide an age-appropriate rating or an advance warning of explicit or disturbing materials. This is called the viewer advisory. Sometimes offensive words can be bleeped out. Potentially offensive images can be blurred or otherwise obscured. Descriptions can be substituted for images. Graphic detail might be omitted. Disturbing content could be moved to a place or time when children are less likely to be watching. So there are a lot of things that journalists can do to honor the viewers. But sometimes it might be necessary to actually show us the real world consequences of human behavior, no matter how disturbing it might be. A few other ethical issues in journalism. One is conflict of interest, and the other is confidentiality of sources. Conflicts of interest first. Right from the Bible, no man or woman can or anybody else can serve two masters. No person can serve two masters. A conflict of interest, that's a situation in which a person is involved in multiple interests, financial or otherwise, and serving one interest could involve working against the other, a conflict of interest. Now, journalists are taught to avoid conflicts of interest or even the appearance of a conflict of interest, to avoid this completely. Many other professions require you to not have conflicts of interest. Now, here's a three-step approach to dealing with conflicts of interest. Step one, avoid personal conflicts of interest in the first place. Anything that would undermine your professional obligations, avoid those. If there is a conflict of interest, resolve it and do it quickly. And third, if a conflict cannot be avoided, it should be acknowledged to the public or to the clients. But transparency here and disclosure is important. Let me talk a little bit about the duty of confidentiality. We know journalists sometimes promise anonymity to their sources. They promise to protect their sources. Did you know journalists sometimes go to jail and are willing to go to jail in order to protect the names and the identities of their news sources? This is a very important ethic in journalism and many, many other fields. Keeping your mouth shut. So confidentially imposes a duty to withhold the names of sources of information or the information itself to third parties. Now, this is really important in a lot of professions: journalism, mental health, the legal profession. When is disclosure of confidential information ever justified? Is it ever justified? The only time I can think of is maybe if somebody's life is on the line, if there's a clear and present danger to somebody's life. But we usually want to really kind of keep our promise. Okay, if we promise confidentiality, then we have a duty, an obligation to keep our promise. All right, that's all I've got in this lecture about some of the ethics involved in the world of journalism. In the next video, I believe we'll start talking about some of the ethics involved in the manipulation of images, including those in the world of journalism. All right, that's all we've got for this video. Take care of yourself and each other, and I hope to see you soon. So long, everybody.